Washington, D.C., our nation's capital, has one of the most storied and controversial histories in the National Football League. From George Preston Marshall to Josh Harris and Magic Johnson's ownership, this franchise has seen its ups and downs over its history. Today, we are going to take a look into one of the NFL's oldest franchises and some of the wildest memories from the Washington organization, both on the field with their multiple world championships and Super Bowls, and off the field with their controversial ownerships and name changes. If you are a fan of football and the history of America's favorite pastime, you are going to want to stick around and watch this video on the incredible story of the Washington football franchise. The Washington Redskins, now known as the Washington Commanders, have one of the most storied and controversial histories in the National Football League. Since its founding in 1932, the franchise has experienced championship glory, social and political controversies, and a complete transformation of its identity. The Washington football franchise began in Boston, Massachusetts in 1932. George Preston Marshall, a businessman with interests in several industries, founded the Boston Braves football team. The name Braves was selected to match the Boston Braves baseball team. However, in 1933, Marshall decided to rebrand the team to the Boston Redskins, in part because of the head coach Lone Star Dietz, who claimed Native American heritage in the Sioux tribe. Speaking of the name change, Marshall later said, "I chose the name Redskins out of respect for Dietz, and to maintain the connection with Native American culture. It was never meant to offend anyone." But we will get to the Redskins name controversy later on in the video. Despite Marshall's intentions, the team struggled to gain traction in Boston, both on and off the field. Low attendance records at Fenway Park and financial losses eventually led Marshall's partners to sell their ownership to him, which allowed him to relocate the team to Washington, D.C. in 1937. He kept the Redskins name, believing it would appeal to fans in the nation's capital. The move coincided with a pivotal moment in the franchise's early history: the acquisition of a future NFL legend, quarterback Sammy Baugh. The Redskins' first season in Washington in 1937 was a triumph. Led by Sammy Baugh, the team captured the NFL championship by defeating the Chicago Bears 28-21. Baugh, a revolutionary passer, quickly became the face of the franchise. When asked about the victory and his role in the team's success, Baugh remarked, "The whole idea of passing as a primary attack was new back then. We were just trying to win games, but I guess we changed the game forever." Baugh's influence extended beyond the championship. In his 16-year career, he led the Redskins to 5 NFL championship games, winning 2 in 1937 and 1942. His performance set the standard for future quarterbacks and helped the Redskins become one of the NFL's premier teams during the league's early years. President Franklin D. Roosevelt, an avid football fan, was known to attend Redskins games at Griffith Stadium between Georgia Avenue and 5th Street. During a radio broadcast of one game, Roosevelt famously quipped, "I like my football like I like my politics, tough and competitive." The team's close connection with the capital made them a fixture in Washington's political and social circles. The 1950s were a rough era for the Redskins and owner George Preston Marshall. After years of on-field success, the team entered a prolonged period of mediocrity. While they had loyal fans, they struggled to field competitive teams. The franchise also became known for a controversial decision by George Preston Marshall: his refusal to sign African-American players. George Preston Marshall was a controversial owner in his day. For all of the modern-day Redskins and Commanders fans who despise their former owner, Dan Snider, George Preston Marshall was 10 times worse than Dan Snider. Would you believe he ordered the infamous Redskins marching band to play Dixie on the field for 23 years? He was openly racist, and Marshall's segregationist views stood out, especially as other teams in the NFL had begun integrating. "The Redskins were the last holdout," said sports journalist Michael Wilbon. It was an open secret that Marshall had no intention of signing a black player, and that wasn't going to change unless he was forced to. In 1961, federal pressure mounted. Stuart Udall, the U.S. Secretary of the Interior, issued an ultimatum. The Redskins had to integrate or face the loss of their lease on the newly built D.C. Stadium, funded by the federal government. Under this pressure, Marshall relented and signed Bobby Mitchell, making him the first African-American player for the Redskins in 1962. "I knew what it meant for me to be here," Mitchell later said in an interview. "It wasn't just about football anymore. This was about breaking barriers. I faced a lot of hostility, but I knew that it was bigger than me." Mitchell quickly became one of the most productive players in the league, helping to revitalize the Redskins during the 1960s. His arrival marked a turning point in both the franchise's history and the NFL's overall integration. In the late 1960s, after years of declining performance and fan frustration, the Washington Redskins sought a change in leadership that would return the franchise to its former glory. In 1969, they made a bold move by hiring one of the most respected figures in football history, Vince Lombardi, as head coach and general manager. Lombardi, who had become a legendary figure after leading the Green Bay Packers to 5 NFL championships and 2 Super Bowl victories, was seen as the savior who could resurrect the struggling Redskins franchise. Vince Lombardi was the greatest coach of all time, Redskins president and owner Edward Bennett Williams said during Lombardi's introduction. "We knew he was the man to lead this franchise out of its mediocrity. His arrival in Washington was a beacon of hope for our fans and our city." Vince Lombardi came to Washington with his signature coaching style: discipline, hard work, and a fierce determination to win. "I don't think there's a person in this organization that didn't know we were in for something special the moment Vince walked through the door," said Redskins linebacker Chris Hanburger. His intensity, his attention to detail, it was on a different level. Under Lombardi, the Redskins immediately saw a cultural shift. His famous motto, "Winning isn't everything, it's the only thing," resonated deeply with the players, many of whom had grown accustomed to years of mediocrity. Players like quarterback Sonny Jurgensen, tight end Jerry Smith, and wide receiver Charlie Taylor thrived under Lombardi's leadership. "He demanded excellence," Jurgensen said. "Vince came in and turned us into a team that believed in ourselves again. We weren't just playing football anymore. We were playing to win." In 1969, Lombardi's first and only season with the Redskins, the team posted a 7-5-2 record, their first winning season since 1955. Although they didn't make the playoffs, Lombardi's influence was evident. "He gave us hope and structure," said Taylor. "Before Vince, we were a team of talented individuals, but he turned us into a cohesive unit. We knew that if he stayed, we'd be competing for championships in no time." Sadly, Lombardi's time with the Redskins was cut short. In June 1970, Lombardi was diagnosed with an aggressive form of colon cancer. He battled the disease for months, but by September, he passed away at the age of 57. His death not only shook the football world, but also left the Redskins without the man they believed would lead them back to the pinnacle of the NFL. "He was more than a coach to us," said Jerry Smith. "He was a mentor and a father figure. His time with us may have been short, but the impact he left on this organization will last forever." Though Vince Lombardi's tenure in Washington was brief, his impact on the franchise and the NFL was profound. His arrival signaled a new era for the Redskins, one that set the foundation for future success. After his death, the team struggled for a few more years, but eventually built on the structure Lombardi established, which helped pave the way for the championship teams of the 1980s under a young and brilliant offensive coach, Joe Gibbs. "Vince's presence can still be felt in this organization," said Gibbs years later. "Even though he was only with the Redskins for one season, he helped change the culture. He laid the groundwork that future coaches, including myself, would benefit from." Washington had a tough couple of years, losing their world-class coach Vince Lombardi, as well as their former owner George Preston Marshall a year earlier. The team's ownership was tied up in legal disputes among trustees and Marshall's widow for years. The 70s were tough, but they found a new owner in 1974 that would change the landscape of football in Washington, D.C. forever. Jack Kent Cooke, a renowned businessman and owner of the Los Angeles Lakers, saw an opportunity to secure full control of the Washington franchise. In 1974, Jack Kent Cooke negotiated his way to becoming the majority owner of the Washington Redskins by purchasing a controlling interest in the trust. Cooke was a hands-on owner who had a history of success with the Los Angeles Lakers and Kings. The Redskins were on their way to a new era of competitiveness and passion for excellence. By the 1980s, the Redskins were ready to return to glory, and the man responsible for leading them there was Joe Gibbs. Hired by owner Jack Kent Cooke in 1981, Gibbs transformed the Redskins into one of the most dominant franchises of the decade. From the moment Joe walked through the door, you knew he was special, Cooke said. He brought a level of professionalism and commitment that we hadn't seen in years. With the new head coach ready to produce a high-quality product on the field, Jack Kent Cooke went to work to produce a high-quality product off the field. Cooke understood the importance of the fan experience. While the Redskins had been playing at DC Stadium, which would be later named RFK Stadium, Cooke made it clear that he valued a strong connection with the fan base. And the fans absolutely loved him because of this philosophy. RFK Stadium became known for its electric atmosphere. The stadium would sway as thousands of passionate fans jumped and cheered during games, a phenomenon that became part of the Redskins' home field advantage. Gibbs's teams won 3 Super Bowl titles in 1982, 1987, and 1991. His ability to adjust to different players and styles became his hallmark. It didn't matter who was under center, said Joe Theismann, the quarterback for the 1982 Super Bowl team. Joe knew how to get the best out of every player. He was a master strategist. One of the most memorable moments in franchise history occurred during Super Bowl 22 in 1988, when Doug Williams, the Redskins quarterback, became the first African-American quarterback to start and win a Super Bowl. "I wasn't just playing for me," Williams said in an emotional post-game interview. "I was playing for every black quarterback that never got a chance. This was for them." Williams's performance, throwing for 4 touchdowns in the second quarter alone, remains one of the most impressive displays in Super Bowl history. "It wasn't just a victory for the Redskins," said ESPN's Stephen A. Smith. "It was a victory for progress in sports." When Joe Gibbs retired for the first time in 1993, the Redskins entered a period of instability. Jack Kent Cooke's health was in decline, and multiple coaching changes and failed attempts to replicate Gibbs' success marked this era. "We just couldn't find that magic again," said former Redskins coach Norv Turner. "There were too many moving parts, and we couldn't maintain consistency." Cooke remained the owner of the Redskins until his death in 1997. At the time of his passing, Cooke's legacy was already cemented as one of the NFL's most successful and respected owners. His vision, leadership, and investment in the franchise during the 1970s and 1980s turned the Redskins into a premier organization and one of the most successful in NFL history. A significant change came in 1999 when Daniel Snider, a lifelong fan of the team, purchased the Redskins for $800 million. While many fans were excited about the new ownership, Snider's reign was marked by controversy. "He spent money on the wrong players and made decisions that hurt the team," said former player Brian Mitchell. "It was frustrating to see the team fall apart." The team struggled to regain its championship form under Snider's leadership. Despite heavy investments in free agents like Deion Sanders and Bruce Smith, and arguably one of the worst contract busts in NFL history in signing former Tennessee Titans defensive lineman Albert Haynesworth, the results on the field were often underwhelming. "We were always chasing headlines instead of building a real foundation," said Mitchell. "That's why we never succeeded." The most contentious issue surrounding the franchise in recent years was the debate over the Redskins name. For decades, Native American groups had protested against the name, calling it a racial slur. In 2013, Snider famously stated, "We'll never change the name." Never. However, public pressure intensified, especially after the 2020 social justice movement following the murder of George Floyd. Corporate sponsors like FedEx, Nike, and PepsiCo called for the team to change its name, and the NFL joined the chorus. It became clear that holding on to the Redskins name was no longer tenable, said NFL Commissioner Roger Goodell. "We had to move forward." In July 2020, the franchise announced it would retire the Redskins name and logo. "It was time," said Snider in a statement. "This is a new chapter for the franchise." The team played the next 2 seasons as the Washington football team before officially rebranding as the Washington Commanders in February 2022. We chose the name Commanders because it represents leadership and the role Washington, D.C. plays in our country, said co-owner Tanya Snider. It's about honoring the past while building a future we can all be proud of. The Washington Commanders rebranding has marked a fresh start for the franchise's front office, but significant challenges still brood with the loyal Redskins fan base. On the field, the team is still trying to recapture the glory of its past. "We know what this team is capable of," said head coach Ron Rivera. "We have the talent and we have the drive. Now it's about executing and building something that lasts." Off the field, the franchise saw huge backlash under the new Commanders name, as well as heavy scrutiny for workplace misconduct allegations, further tarnishing Daniel Snyder's legacy as an owner. The failed rollout of the new Commanders name, along with mounting pressure from congressional investigations, NFL legal issues, and outright frustration with the other NFL owners, was too much for Dan Snyder to keep his pride and joy, the Washington football franchise. He eventually had to sell his team for a record $6.05 billion in July of 2023. Fast forward to today, and you have a newly revitalized franchise under new owner Josh Harris and his ownership group. The fans have come back to cheer for Washington, especially with the new arrival of general manager Adam Peters, head coach Dan Quinn, and the arrival of generational talent and franchise quarterback Jayden Daniels. The Washington Commanders' journey from the Boston Braves to one of the NFL's most iconic franchises has been filled with ups and downs, triumphs, and controversies. From their early glory days with Sammy Baugh to the integration struggles of the 1960s, the championship dominance of the Joe Gibbs era, and the name controversy that reshaped the team's identity, the Commanders have always been a significant part of the NFL's history. As the team looks toward the future with their new ownership and front office, and now that they have Jayden Daniels at the quarterback position, the fan base is back and livelier than ever. The buzz around DC is just like it was in the RFK days with Gibbs, Clark, Monk, Sanders, the Hogs, and Darrell Green. The hope is that they will honor their past while building a brighter, more inclusive legacy. Thanks for watching, and we will see you next time. Don't forget to like, subscribe, and hit the notification bell to see more videos from NFL Hard Count.